Welcome to Interact's Creator Stories podcast. Interact is the easiest way to convert curious people into loyal and happy customers by using a lead generating quiz. On Creator Stories, we get to hear the entrepreneur's journey. This is a podcast about how those creators took their knowledge and experiences to carve out a place in the world, owned what they know is special about themselves, and turned it into a successful company. Today, we get to meet Franklin Taggart, a business consultant and the producer and host of Your Own Best Company, which is a podcast for people who love to work alone. He is also a coach for people who are looking to start their own creative dreams. All right, let's get started. Hi, guys, and welcome back to Interact's Creator Stories podcast. As usual, I am so excited to be here with you. I'm your host, Jasmine Solana, and with me today, I have the wonderful Franklin Taggart. Franklin, thank you so much for joining us on our show.
Jasmine, I am so delighted to be a part of it.
And it's so funny because before we had scheduled this recording, I was like, I don't know if I've had a man on here yet. So welcome as one of the first ones. We have had them. I just haven't interviewed one myself.
I've been to a lot of the collective, the quiz collective meetings, and have been the only guy there.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
But it's all right. I don't mind.
I love it. You're special this way. So everybody got sort of your more formal bio. And kind of now, in your own words, I would love for you to kind of jump into it. You have done quite a bit. So maybe first start off with what your current business is, who your customers are, and then we can jump into the beginning of it all and tell us how you got started.
Oh, very good. Well, my current business is kind of a mix of several things that I really enjoy doing. At the top of the list is coaching. I love working with people. Most of the folks that I work with are over 40, and they've reached a point in their career where they're just really deeply dissatisfied and they need a change. And most of them have been carrying a creative dream for a very long time, and they want to get that dream off the ground, and I help them do that. The second part of what I do is a lot of consulting. I love figuring things out. And that's how I found Interact quizzes, as a matter of fact. It's like I found the quiz software when I was looking for an option for a lead magnet that wasn't some kind of a giveaway or a PDF or something like that. And I found the quizzes and I thought, wow, this is cool. So I just dove right in and started figuring out how to use them. So I've been helping people with projects like that for a long time. So a lot of the projects that I help people with are like really high impact marketing campaigns, things that they need to have a high level of creativity on quickly. Those are the ones where I really shine. And then the other area where I work with people is kind of in a hybrid model of helping them learn how to do things for themselves. And part of that is doing things with them rather than for them. So that's another part of what I do.
I love that. I kind of like that mentality of sort of, God, what is it? The saying where it's like, I'll teach you how to fish.
Yeah.
I don't remember it, but you guys know what I mean.
Yeah, give a man a fish and he'll be fed for a day. Teach him how to fish and he'll be fed for life. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I love that. That's awesome. So take us back to the beginning. How did you get started in all of this?
Oh, it's such a weird, long, strange trip. I can't even know. I have no idea where to begin with this. I'm old. Let's put it that way. I'm old, and I grew up in the time when the Brady Bunch was on for the first time.
Wow.
And the Brady Bunch was this group of kids that every time that they turned around, they were getting discovered for some kind of like music career or acting career or something like that. And I honestly thought that was how life worked. So all of the TV shows that I watched kind of put this fantasy in my mind that I could be a musician or a star of some kind. And I kind of followed that dream for a long time. And I've had a frequently interrupted music career since a long time ago. That has been that's been my main thread throughout my whole teenage and adult life is music. And during many of those interruption periods, I had to find ways to make a living. So I started to take jobs that were in strange fields that I wasn't educated in. Like I was in social services for about 7 years, and I was in a gang intervention program as the director of the gang intervention program for a few years, and I worked in a crisis center. And so I got all of this weird mixture of experience. And during that time, I met a guy who was a business consultant, and he became a good friend of mine. And ultimately, we started to have some business partnerships together. But he introduced me to the world of business consulting on a corporate level, and I found that I really liked it, and I found that I had a knack for it. Now, I had graduated with a degree in music and business, so there was some business back there, but I had never really put it to work in my music career yet. So I did the business consulting thing for a couple of years, and that allowed me to actually start to take my music career a little bit more seriously. So I started doing music almost on a full-time basis, and then on a full-time basis for about 10 years.
Wow.
In the midst of that, I started to have tendonitis in both of my arms. Now, I can't remember if it was your podcast or another that I listened to recently, where you had talked to a woman who had been a musician, and she'd had some kind of an injury.
I don't think so.
Was that your podcast? It must have been somebody else's. But that was my story too. It was like I couldn't play the guitar for longer than a few minutes without it becoming excruciatingly painful. And then a couple of years later, I got sick. And my music career, I thought, was over at that point. I thought it was done. And so I was just kind of scrambling to find things that I could do for money. In the midst of all of that, I was hospitalized several times and really had to, I had to find my feet. And a couple of things that were going on during that time, this was when digital business started to really take off, and the internet was still fairly new on a big scale. Facebook wasn't even around yet. I remember I kind of started on AOL and on MySpace. Those were kind of the two areas where my digital stuff started. And I started to experiment with digital businesses. And the one that I started really in earnest with was blogging. And blogging was something that I did throughout the whole time that I was not doing well physically. I could write blogs. And at one point I had 17 different blogs going on at the same time that were on different topics that were interesting to me. And a couple of them did really, really well. And it was also during that time that I tried my first podcast. And that was around 2009, 2010. And I also, during that time, put out some of the first online courses on home recording and on guitar, on beginning guitar. Those are still floating around out there in the world somewhere. I don't know. But so I found that there was an option that was really cool. About the same time, there were people in my life who wanted to make a transition from kind of a corporate or an organization-based career into a more creative individual career path. And they asked me for help. And I didn't even know that what I was doing was coaching at the time. And that dawned on me a little bit later. But the opportunities just kept showing up. People kept asking me, what do I need to do in order to start, booking myself for musical gigs? Or what do I need to do to start getting art shows, or to start getting my art placed in galleries and stuff like that? And I just, I'm the kind of guy who likes to figure things out. So I just started figuring stuff out with people. And ultimately, I discovered that was coaching. And the light really went off. I had just had major surgery. Now, this was 12 years ago. I had major surgery on a lung that was really having some problems. And a friend of mine came by who was the hospital chaplain, and he wanted to see how I was doing. It was his job to see how I was doing. And I said, I'm doing okay. I'm on all kinds of narcotics here. How bad can I be? And we ended up talking for the next close to 3 hours about his music career. And at the end of that conversation, I was just wired for sound. Now here I was on like some kind of a drip that, pushed the button, and I thought I was just going to nod off and go to sleep. I couldn't sleep. And I was up until probably like 6 or 6:30 the next morning. And it dawned on me that night that this was something that I really could do. And it's something that I could charge for. And it's something that I loved on the same level that I loved music. So that's the kind of long short version of it.
I love that long short.
Yeah.
That's amazing though. And it's really interesting. I always love seeing this sort of, I guess you could call it like pathways that don't seem like it makes sense, but it totally makes sense because I mean, even thinking back to, some of the work that you did before you even got back into music, like social work and all that stuff, like in a sense, you were kind of doing some sort of coaching
Yeah, as I look back
and
on it, that
working with
goes all
people.
the way back to like junior high school.
Right, right. And it's funny because I was just thinking about this yesterday, how I never thought I was going to end up in business myself, but for some reason this like memory came up for me that we were reading Tuck Everlasting. Do you know that
Oh
book?
yeah, I love
And
that book.
I think I was in like fourth grade or fifth grade, and we had to write like, oh, like how would you, make a flyer advertising the like magic water. I don't even remember what it was called that like, gives you like immortality or whatever.
Yeah.
And for some reason, this came up as a memory yesterday that, I enjoyed that project so much. And I remember getting a really good grade on it and putting so much work into it. And when you think back all the way, you're like, oh, wow, I was actually like, this was something that I think I was meant to do. You just don't know it until you finally find it and it clicks for you.
Well, the thing that I forgot to mention is that I had businesses all along the way. I started my first business before I graduated from college, and I've
Wow.
had I've had little businesses like stacked up my whole life. So that's always been just a thread, but I don't ever think about myself as a business person. It's just
Right.
something I always did.
It just happened. It was a part of me.
Yeah.
Oh no, I love that. I love that so much. Do you feel like, I guess, like, you're in this really sort of traumatic situation, right? And you're
Mhm.
having surgery. Like, did you kind of, how did you work through that to where you realized you really loved something, but did you have some sort of like reservations about it?
Oh
Or were
yeah,
you like, okay, I'm going to jump into this?
both. I and I still have probably a monthly visitor that says, "Are you crazy?
I
Who
love
are you
that.
to do this?" And the imposter, whatever you want to call it, still shows up every now and then.
Right.
But I've come to recognize it just as a part of a bigger cycle, and I don't let it stop me from doing things. But the thing that's really interesting about looking back on when I started, it took me a long time to get comfortable calling myself a coach. It took a really long time. I called myself every other thing that I could think of. I'm a mentor, I'm a guide,
Mm.
I'm some kind of, shaman. I don't know.
I
I
love
called
that.
myself a lot of things before coach actually felt right.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden, at one point, it's like I realized, I've been doing this for several years now, and it fits.
Hmm.
Now I feel good in that. That pair of shoes feels really good now, where before it just didn't feel like a good fit. And I was doing coaching all along, and I was getting training wherever I could and finding different ways to learn and learning as I went. But that that sense of, who are you to be doing this would continue to come back.
Right, right. And that's super hard. I guess, like, how did you, was that something that you feel like you constantly went through? And that's why you kept sort of trying to tweak what you called yourself, your title? Or do you kind of feel that it just didn't feel right? And once in a while, the imposter syndrome would come back?
Well, it would come, like I said, it would come around frequently enough that it was a familiar visitor, and it usually corresponded with, that it was the first of the month and rent was due, and here I was,
Mm-hmm.
trying to go out and shake the trees and find clients and stuff like that. And it's like, who are you to be doing this? It's like, you're so not successful. How can you be a coach?
What could it be?
So those kinds of voices were going off all the time. And I think the thing that ultimately proved true was that I just recognized it as kind of it was a habit of thinking. It was like my thinking, I don't know about yours, Jasmine, but my thinking kind of works in cycles where there are patterns that it goes through.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just one of the patterns that would show up at certain times.
Right.
And when I just started to look at it that way, yeah, the thoughts still happen, but I have some choice about whether I take them seriously or not.
I
And
love
I'm
that.
not going to let my thinking stop me from doing what I want to do. That was the big lesson for me.
I love that so much because I think imposter syndrome happens for everybody. It's
Everyone.
just a matter of, what do you do when it happens? For me, I realized that I realized what my trigger was. It was when I started getting like a flood of projects that everyone was like, you'd be great for this. You would be great for this, and you would be great for this. And when you first get it, you're like, yeah, I would be great for this. And you start doing it and you go, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have
Maybe I'm
no
not so great
idea.
after all.
Yeah, you're not that great after all. Um, and this was going to be my next question, just sort of like, how do you sort of stop yourself from thinking that way and like kind of keep going? For me, I just always sort of take a second and I started basically, okay, what can I do that's taking each project one step at a time so that I don't feel overwhelmed, because the overwhelm is where imposter syndrome comes out for me, but I
Yeah.
guess it comes out differently for everybody. So how do you do yours?
I have several things that I've learned along the way that have helped. One of them is just simply doing whatever it is that's in front of me. And I'm going through it right now because I just got a copywriting job that's a little bit above my pay grade. And it's like going off the diving board for the first time. And it feels really awkward and it feels really scary and it feels way out of my league. But I want to do it. So the desire, in my case, outweighs the fear, right? So the fear is going to continue to happen. And I still have this voice going in my head saying, you should have never said yes to this. And the truth of the matter is that voice is just a voice. It's not anything more than my own thinking. And but the desire is greater, and I follow the desire. That's the biggest thing. The second thing that I've learned is that I can't change my thinking. Changing my thinking is just more thinking.
It's too
and
much.
it makes me even more overwhelmed, right? It's
Hmm.
like the thing that I'm overwhelmed by is the amount of thinking that I'm doing in the moment. I'm overwhelmed with thought. And so the thing that I'm really grateful for is I ran across a couple of books a few years back that are about an understanding that people call the inside out understanding. And one of the books was The Inside Out Revolution by Michael Neal, and the other one was Clarity by Jamie Smart. And I read both of those books, and I thought, dang, I wish I would have learned this when I was like 15 years old, because this really is revolutionary. And what's really funny is that all it is just a shift in understanding. And that is that my thinking is not being caused by my circumstances. My experience is being caused by my thinking.
Wow.
And just that realization all of a sudden gave me the freedom to say, oh, my experience in this moment right now is being only caused by the thinking that's going on and not by the situation itself. And there's something I can't put my finger on what really happens when that realization happens. But all of a sudden, it's like my thinking starts to just kind of slow down. And I start to have a broader perception or a broader view, a greater sense of awareness in the moment. And that gives me the freedom then to choose rather than to be at the slave of my overwhelm. Right?
I love that. I don't know
Isn't
why I
that
whispered
cool?
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I love the words that you used, that you now have the freedom to choose.
Yeah.
So powerful.
It's made a huge difference for me.
I like that a lot because I think, when we talk about sort of mental health and self-care, the common ones that you hear are really, journaling, meditating, walking, which are all, of course, really great
Yeah.
things. But sometimes for a lot of people, it could just be sort of like, let me shift the way that I think about the world. And
Yeah.
that also might be what clicks for me. So my fiance, for example, he recently started getting into journaling, but it was the hardest thing for him.
Yeah.
He was like, it doesn't feel natural to me. I don't really know like what I'm writing. I don't know what to write. And he would always complain like it's only like a quarter of the page and I don't feel like I got anything done. And for me, journaling, I could journal for like pages.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, I don't know what to tell you.
Well,
But I think it's always just a matter of finding what works for you. And
yeah.
if it is that, then that's what you should continue with.
For me, writing is a very deep process and it's not easy to access.
Mm.
And so for me, speaking is something that I can do for days. I can talk to you, I can till your ears fall off. But when it comes to writing, it takes me I used to fail tests because I couldn't write fast enough.
Wow.
And so journaling for me is very similar to what he's experiencing, where it's like, yeah, it takes a long time to get very little result. And that always made me laugh because when I was blogging, I was just writing, my blogs would be like 2 paragraphs long, but it took me better part of a morning to write those 2 paragraphs.
Nice.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that everybody has their own communication strengths. And it's usually in one of a few areas. You can be a strong writer, and writing may be the easiest way for you to gather your thoughts and to organize them and to express them. Some people are just great at using imagery, right? And then there are other folks like me who can talk about anything at any time at the drop of a hat, and it's the easiest way for us to make sense. And then there's a group of folks that they communicate through doing. Like they show you something. They put something together. They make something, right? We all have communication strengths, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that we have tend to be writing, speaking, imagery, and then there are some folks who communicate through doing. Like they make things, they fix things, they do things, they understand how things work. That's the way that they communicate best. So it's kind of in that case, it's probably not a language-based communication as much as it is kind of a production-based communication, right?
Right.
So one of the things that I help people with in their marketing is to leverage those communication strengths.
Ooh, I love that.
It works beautifully. And it kind of takes a lot of the pressure off when it's like everybody's telling you that you need to be on TikTok and you hate making videos. It's like all of a sudden you can say, well, screw TikTok, I'm a blogger.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay to let yourself have your own limitations and work with your strengths rather than trying to work in areas not that aren't so much.
I love that a lot because I think it's so easy to get caught up. I mean, one, in social media in general,
Yeah.
there are some people out there who say you have to be on all of them, every single one, which in itself is exhausting,
Yeah.
in my opinion, at least. And then there are some people out there who say, like, well, you need to focus on this and that, or if you focus on, say, for example, Instagram, it needs to look exactly like this. And I think there are sort of methods and tried and true sort of tips. What you're saying makes so much sense to me because, it feels natural and that
Yeah.
will show up,
Yeah.
in
You're
what
not
you're
trying to
doing.
fit into a weird hole, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I always, I mean, I've seen a lot of the sort of like TikTok style videos of people, and you can see that they're uncomfortable, or it like looks uncomfortable, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Like, I don't know how to really explain it with words, but
Well, you can tell, right? You
yeah,
can tell.
besides that. And so I think, I mean, as sort of somebody who even, critiques quizzes, helps people with quizzes in that sense, people can tell when it's not you
Yeah.
speaking, or they can't tell when it doesn't feel authentic. And I always tell people, like, that's the most important part. You're going to have a business and services that thousands, hundreds of other people are going to also have. It's a
Yeah.
matter of who you are that they will be sort of, attracted to, and your personality. And that's what will attract them to your business.
The one thing that I tell people about social media is to go ahead and reserve your account and your brand account on every social media platform. Don't let somebody else get it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to use it, great. If you don't, don't.
That's incredible advice. I never even thought of that.
You know, as long as you can have your own brand out there on every platform, you're golden, because that gives you the ability to come back to it and say, is this something that I want to try? Well,
Mm-hmm.
now I don't have to go pay somebody $10,000 for my name, you know?
Or it could even be something as simple as just being present on there, in the sense of, maybe you share links to your blog post,
Yeah.
and that's all it is, even if you don't get much traffic there. But if somebody were to like Google you and those accounts came up, they
Yeah.
will see, oh, this is tied to them, and it's real,
And
basically.
oh yeah, and all of that can be automated so easily now. It's like might as well.
Right.
The only thing you
Right.
can't automate now is Clubhouse.
I know. I'm not even gonna lie. I don't even know what happened with Clubhouse. I was in there for, I think, a month, and then I kind of dropped off. But
I think people just realized that it actually did take a lot more commitment than other social
mhm,
media did,
right,
because you have to show up live. You know,
right.
you can't
That's
you can't
true.
phone it in, right?
That is true. Something I did want to ask you that caught my attention really early that I just remembered. Your customers specifically, you said 40 and up, right?
Most of them, yeah.
Okay. I was gonna ask, like, is that something that you chose, and then also why?
I have a feeling that the reason that it ended up that way was that, first of all, I feel like that there is something to be said for people of a certain age really relating well to each other. And the people that tended to come to me when I first started were my own age. They were folks who had been in the career path for, some of them, 20, 25 years.
Wow.
And they'd been holding on to these dreams. I remember one guy came to me and he wanted to learn how to play the guitar since he was 13 years old. And he had just retired and he had a lot of time. And he said, I want to be a guitar player. Well, we got him to that level where he could be a guitar player. And sadly, he died not long
Oh,
after that. But the thing that I want to just get across to people is, like, if you have a creative dream that you've been putting on hold for any reason, you need to get it off the back burner and you need to do it now. Because you don't have any guarantees. When I was 46, I thought my life was over. My career,
right.
I thought my career for sure was over in music. There were always things that I found to do, but you know, when you're gone, you don't have anything to do anymore. So the thing that I would say is like, if you do have a creative dream that you've been putting on hold, I don't care how old you are, take it seriously and get it off the back burner and start doing something in that direction now.
I love that.
Yeah. I
I love
feel a lot of urgency around it.
Right, right. I think it's so true because I mean, it's kind of like I've always wanted to travel the world, but you get caught up. I wasn't one of those people. My sister was. She was one of
Yeah.
those people that as soon as she had summer break, she would my parents didn't wouldn't pay for any of it. She got her own job, paid for all her travel. She's like gone to so many different countries.
Yeah.
And for me, that was never really my thing. I was always, oh, like maybe next time, maybe next time. And now, I mean, I know I'm not that old. I'm 28, but for some reason, I can't stop thinking about I'm in the stage of like, oh, I'm about to get married. I'm going to start a family. How hard is it going to travel with small kids? And before you know it, what if I like who knows what will happen? Maybe my leg will break and I won't be able to walk as well and then I can't travel. And if you go to Europe and like I go down this rabbit hole
Yeah.
of wow, like I need to do this now in a sense. And
Yeah.
it sounds a little dramatic, but pretty much I just totally understand what you're saying where it's like don't put it on the back burner. If this is something you really want to do, just get started.
Absolutely. That's the thing. It's like, you know, even in your situation where there's marriage and kids on the horizon, those don't have to be limitations for the things that you really want to do. It's like you can find ways to make it work, and I've seen people do it over and over and over. We
I
have good
love that.
friends that we knew in DC, and when their kids were like in fifth grade and seventh grade, they took a year off and went around the world,
Wow.
and they just went to as many different countries as they could in that one year, and it was a spectacular life experience for them, but they just found a way to, and they did it. It was an amazing story.
I love that. I love that so much.
Yep.
So crazy. Wow. Well, I feel like we got so much good stuff. I'm feeling really empowered. But Franklin, thank
Excellent.
you so much for being on here. I was about to say for having me. We have at the time of this recording, guys, it's been a short week. We had a 3-day weekend, so I still
Yeah.
feel like I'm catching up. But I have two questions that I close out with if
Okay.
you're up for it. So, second to last is I know you've kind of said a lot, but are there three things that most people would not know about you?
Well, three things that people would not know about me. One of them is that when I was in seventh grade, I took ballet lessons with the University of Wyoming football team.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that a cool one? The second one is that there are a few people that know this about me, but not a lot of people who know this about me. But when I was in college, I got to play guitar with a famous jazz trumpeter named Dizzy Gillespie, who was just an absolute amazing musician and a very, very funny, funny man. And then the third thing that I think people may not know about me is that my guidance counselor never thought that I would graduate from high school.
Wow.
And then I went and I graduated from high school with a really low grade point average. But then I went on to college and graduated from college. And I just want that guidance counselor to roll over in his grave right now.
Those are really good ones, though.
Cool.
I loved your three. Wow. That's pretty funny. I will say I've had similar instances that we could talk about after.
All right, cool.
Okay, last question for you. What is a single piece of advice you would give to yourself at the start of it all?
Um, I think I would encourage myself to be a better advocate for myself than I was,
I love
because
that.
I just didn't stand up for myself, and I didn't allow myself to go for the things that I really wanted. I waited to be invited. I waited to be asked. That was a huge mistake.
I love that. What would you have done instead?
I would have been much more assertive. I would have asked for the things that I would have asked for the opportunities that I wanted. Instead of being upset about not being asked to be in the band, I would have gone to that person and said, why wasn't I asked to be in this band? I'm the guy you should have had.
Right.
Why didn't you ask me? And I never had the gumption to do that kind of stuff.
I love that. I will say, my fiance always tells me, he goes, worst thing they'll say is no.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that?
Well, for some folks, rejection is one of the worst pains.
That's true. Okay, there is that. There is that. Um, so where can people find you online if they're looking?
Everywhere.
I love it.
Easiest place is franklintaggart.com. That's my main blog, and I still use it to this day. And I'm on virtually every social media platform with either at Franklin Taggart or Franklin Taggart Coaching. So I'm findable pretty much everywhere.
Love it. And we will link that in the show notes if anyone's looking, so you can find it there.
And also, if you are an Interact subscriber, find me in the Quiz Collective.
Right. Yeah, find us in the
My favorite thing about Interact is actually the community. Yeah, it's amazing.
It's something new, and we're trying to make it more sort of community. I don't even know how to explain it. We're trying to sort of like cater to not just people who are learning about quizzes, but also people who are already in there doing it and also want to hear what's new at Interact and what's coming up.
It's very cool.
And not me, including my own plug in there, but
I love it.
Well, Franklin, thank you so much. And everyone, of course, thank you always for listening. You can find those links in the show notes, and we'll see you next time.